Hi, guys, and welcome back to Drive to School Chat, where we discuss a subtopic in geography on the way to school. Now, today, I'd like us to talk about the long profile of a river and the part of a drainage basin. Now, the long profile of a river is very important for our specification and has shown up a number of times in the examination. So it's important for us to know what's happening along that long profile of a river. So that's where we are going to begin today. And the long profile of a river is a side view of the river that is showing us how that particular river is changing as it flows through the upper course, the middle course, and the lower course. So we could actually say that it's a side view of the river that is showing us the changes in the relief around the river, or the gradient or the topography around the river as it flows from source to mouth. All right. Now, let's then talk about that long profile in a little more detail. And the first thing that we are going to mention here is that the long profile is divided into three main sections. Now, the first section is the upper course of that river, and then the second one is the middle course, and the last one is the lower course of that river. Now, obviously, through those courses of a river, a lot of changes are taking place, and I'd like us to discuss those as well, because they are aspects of that long profile that you could be asked about in an exam situation. Okay, so in the upper course, what's going on in the upper course? Now, in the upper course of the river, the land around the river is very, very steep. Now, we know that it's very steep because the river will begin mostly in upland areas or in upland landscape. And because the land around the river is very steep, you have the formation of landforms such as V-shaped valleys. And the other thing we need to know here is the type of erosion that is taking place in the upper course, and that is vertical erosion that is taking place. In other words, the river is cutting downwards other than outwards. And because it's cutting downwards, you then have the formation of landforms such as those V-shaped valleys I've just mentioned, and then interlocking spurs, and then you may also get rapids and waterfalls. All right, that's the upper course of the river. What about the middle course along that long profile of the river? So the middle course obviously is not as steep as the upper course. So you can see that the gradient on the long profile is actually slightly less steep. So it's a lot gentler. It's sloping a lot gentler. Okay, so it's gently sloping compared to the steep slopes that we had in the upper course. Right. So what kind of erosion is happening here? So instead of vertical erosion, we now have lateral erosion, which is where the river is eroding outwards or sideways. So that then means that the river channel is not going to be as narrow as it was in the upper course. Instead, it's going to be a lot wider. So as it widens, you then have, and then obviously as well, the river is receiving a lot of water from the drainage basin, which we shall talk about shortly, not too long. So it's receiving a lot of water from that drainage basin, and therefore the river's holding capacity must also increase. And also, we are talking about the river flowing faster and having a lot more energy to erode because there's a lot more water, and therefore that river channel now is going to become wider as more erosion is taking place on the sides of the river. All right, so that then leads to landforms are being created, such as meanders, okay, and so on, which we have talked about in our previous video. So if you'd like to know about the rivers, the landforms that are created in the middle and lower course of a river, you can check out that video. Anyway, now let's carry on. So we are then now moving on to the lower course of that river along that long profile. Now, in the lower course, you now have more of deposition taking place other than erosion. So we said that in the upper course, we have vertical erosion. In the middle course, we have lateral erosion. But then in the lower course, we have more of deposition as a feature of the lower course, or, more of deposition taking place. Now, that deposition then leads to the formation of landforms such as oxbow lakes. And then you also have estuaries being a landform, or deltas, okay, and mudflats. So all these are then features of or landforms created as a result of that deposition taking place. Okay, so that is the river's long profile, or the long profile of a river. Now let's move on then to the parts of a drainage basin. Now, like the name suggests, a basin is a container. So it contains water. Now, obviously, we can liken that to the drainage basin. And that is because that drainage basin is like a huge funnel that is channeling all the water within that funnel and taking it to the river. So a drainage basin, by definition, is the area of land that is drained by a river and its tributaries. So drained there meaning that the river is taking all the water from that particular drainage basin. So the water is funneling eventually, or from that area, that big area, that basin area, and eventually ending up in the river. So drainage basin is the area of land that is drained by a river and its tributaries. Okay, so what are the parts of the drainage basin? We'll begin right at the start, and that will be at the source. Now, the source obviously is where the river starts. Now, it's in upland areas most of the time, and it could be as a result of snowmelt, for example, because we know that in a lot of upland areas, you're likely to have lower temperatures, and therefore you're likely to have snow. So when that snow melts, it's likely to form, it's likely to lead to the formation of a river. So that's where the river is at its source. Then as the river continues to flow, it's then going to get tributaries from that drainage basin. So these are small rivers or small streams that are bringing water into the main river channel. So they are called tributaries, and they are draining the water from the drainage basin, bringing it to the main river channel. Now, that's the second part of a drainage basin. And then the third one is the confluence. And the confluence is where that tributary joins the main river, or is where two rivers meet or join. That is a confluence. It's a point at which the river, two rivers or two streams meet. Okay, so let's move on then to the next feature, or the next part of a drainage basin. The fourth part of the drainage basin that we are going to talk about is the watershed. And the watershed is what separates two different drainage basins. So it's the boundary of the drainage basin. So it's the area of land that will separate two drainage basins, one from the other. So it distinguishes between two rivers, because each river will have its own drainage basin. So the watershed is the boundary, okay? Right. Let's move on then to the fifth one. And the fifth one is actually the part, the fifth one is actually just the drainage basin. And we'd already mentioned what that is. So the area of land that is drained by the river and its tributaries. And then the next part of a drainage basin is the floodplain. And the floodplain is in the lower course of the river. And this is the area of land that is likely to flood when the river bursts its banks. So the floodplain is an area that is likely to deposited material. It's an area of land that is flat next to the river in the lower course, and that is likely to flood and is likely to have flooded material, so silt and sediment and alluvium that has been deposited. And the floodplain makes a very good land for farming because of that deposited silt or alluvium. So that's the floodplain. Then the next part of the river that we need to mention here is actually just the main river channel. And obviously this is where all the river is being drained into. So that's the main river channel. And then towards the end of the river, obviously, where it meets the sea, is the mouth of the river. And that is also a part of the river, or the part of the drainage basin. So the mouth of the river, the point at which the river drains into the sea. And we also know that at that mouth of the river, you're also likely to get the formation of estuaries, which you can have a look at in the last video that we did. So estuaries, deltas, and mudflats. All right. So what have we talked about this morning? We've talked about the long profile of a river, and we've said that it's a side view of the river that shows how the gradient or the topography of that river changes as you flow. It flows rather from source to mouth. And then it will have an upper course, a middle course, and a lower course. And then we've also talked about the parts of a drainage basin, all the way from the source of that river to the mouth of that river. Thank you very much for joining me in this Drive to School chat and on this journey towards excellent exam results. If you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss on the way to school, please do let me know in the comment section below, and we shall be sure to discuss it one of these fine mornings on our way to school. All the best, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.